The subsidies to oil and gas companies in the form of tax breaks cost the federal government in the neighborhood of $4 billion a year. And what most Democrats, including this Democrat, propose to do is to end those subsidies and to use the money that we save by ending them to reduce our federal budget deficit. Now, this is not a particularly complicated issue. If oil and gas companies were struggling, if a large number of jobs were at risk, if ending these subsidies threatened to increase the price that families have to pay for gasoline or fuel oil, or if ending them would create a drag on our fragile economic recovery, if any of those things were true, this might be a closer call. But they're not true. We are subsidizing massively profitable oil companies. Nearly every independent analyst, and even some from the oil industry itself, tells us that this proposal will not alter the economic fundamentals that determine gasoline prices. Oil production, and therefore the jobs that it creates, will not decline if we pass this bill. Struggling families and small businesses will not pay more because we end these subsidies. And by ending them, we can help close a budget deficit that we all agree is a significant problem. The arguments against this measure are misguided. Republicans have claimed it would increase gas prices. Independent economists disagree. For instance, the nonpartisan Congressional Research Service reported last week that, quote, prices are well in excess of costs, and a small increase in taxes would therefore be less likely to reduce oil output and hence increase petroleum product gasoline prices. Even the tax expert of the American Petroleum Institute said last week that the proposal, quote, would not affect the global economics underpinning oil supply and demand, which explain today's gasoline prices, close quote. Now, that's an important point to keep in mind. The price of oil depends on a number of factors, one of which is supply and demand for this internationally traded commodity. Another factor, one which I and several other senators believe bears further examination, is the role of speculation in that market. But the money that we're talking about saving is relatively small in the context of a massive global marketplace for oil. It is also small relative to the profits that oil companies have reaped. The 5 companies that would be affected by the proposal that we support made a combined $76 billion in profit in 2010. Now, that's not revenue, that's not sales, that's profit, $76 billion in profit. From 2001 to 2010, their combined profit approached $1 trillion. With the price of oil in the neighborhood of $100 a barrel, these record profits are likely to continue. These companies do not need taxpayer assistance. And at the same time, the money that we spend helping them is increasing the budget deficit, a deficit that our Republican friends say justifies making dramatic reductions in health care for our seniors, support for our college students, Head Start for our youngest students, and other draconian cuts. Yet tax breaks for companies making billions of dollars a year in profits is something they say we can afford. I don't buy it. More importantly, the American people don't buy it. The American people know these tax breaks that we can't afford for companies that can more than afford to lose them are wrong. They know that if we're going to get serious about our debt problem, we need to eliminate tax expenditures that contribute to our deficit. They know that if we can't tackle such an obvious example of wasteful spending as this, further reform is unlikely. The American people recognize the fundamental unfairness of tax breaks for oil companies making billions in profits. At the same time, working families are told they will have to do with less. Last week, when the CEOs of major oil companies testified before the Finance Committee, they said that they want to be treated just like everybody else. I say, fine, let's do that. Let's tell the massively profitable oil companies not to expect tax subsidies from Uncle Sam. And let's expect those companies to give a little bit as we address the budget deficit, just as middle-class American families are going to have to give a little bit as we cut back on important programs for them. Mr. President, our Republican colleagues say that our deficits are unsustainable, and I agree. They say the deficit problem is urgent, and I agree. They say we must act, and I agree. And we can act. We can end these oil company subsidies. Now is the time for all of us to act, to end billions of dollars in handouts to massively profitable oil companies and use that money to help put our fiscal house in order.